Hello, 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 everyone. Happy Wednesday. I'm Claire Jones. I'm an author and small publisher committed to changing the world for the better through inclusive stories and practices. And we are jumping on today for my Authorvision Facebook Live series, where I interview the amazing and inspiring authors in my network to discuss the personal visions that have shaped our lives and careers. So if you're joining us, please like, comment, share below. Let us know that you're here. And today I'm talking to Jill. I'm so glad to have you.
Hi, it's so good to be here.
I feel like we're ships passing in the night on TikTok.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I'm like, I see her content and then like my life needs me. And then I know that every now and then you kind of catch me.
Yeah, it's like, oh, hey, you. Okay, she's gone.
hmm
All right. Yeah, okay, she's gone. All right, cool. So let's dive right back in. Tell me your backstory. How did you get to where you are today?
So I have a kind of funny backstory because the most common thing that people like to associate me with is the Breaking Bad story. Because my career started out, I was a pharmaceutical chemist working in industry on pharmaceutical drug development. And
Wow.
I worked with highly controlled substances. So that's like the stuff that's related to illegal stuff,
Yeah.
which, like when people ask me, do you know how to make? And the answer is, while I don't have anything memorized, yes, I
Theoretically.
do. And then I went back to school and I got a master's and I got my teaching credentials. And I spent about 6 years in the classroom teaching high school chemistry and physics. And so,
Wow.
like, there you go. Like, that's like the straight up Breaking Bad path.
Yeah, yeah.
Except when my oldest daughter was born, she was born 12 weeks premature.
Hmm.
And was a medically complex kid and needed a lot of additional care. And so I decided to step out of the classroom and be that caregiver instead of trying to hire out and spend all of our money on it. And so I've been home since. And writing has always been a passion of mine. And so I decided that that was something that I could do for myself and for my career and for my future. And
Hmm.
that was how I decided to get into writing and publishing.
I love that. So is your writing influenced by all the sciencey stuff, or is it completely separate?
No, it's absolutely influenced by the sciencey stuff. I kind of can't help myself, but I'd like to say that it's very highly accessible science because, I spent a whole like half of a decade making sure that science was accessible to everyone in the
Mm.
classroom.
Mm.
And so, like, there's a lot of science. A lot of the stuff that I write is either straight science fiction or science adjacent, but it's got a good entry point and a heavy character focus.
I feel like you can always tell where authors' nerd zones are based on how detailed they get when it comes to like certain descriptions. Like if it's all med knowledge, you're like, you've worked in the medical field, haven't you?
Yeah, like the creepy laboratories are absolutely based on the laboratories that I used to work in because the facility that I worked at is what's called a high energy facility,
Mm.
which means that they actually used to make rocket fuel for like
Wow.
rocket launches, and they were part of the fuel production to send to send astronauts to the moon, and so like that's highly combustible. And if you're going to have a lab where something explodes, it has to explode safely, which means
Mm.
that all of the laboratories have no windows and they have what's called blast walls, which means that one wall is weaker than all of the others. So if there's an explosion, we know which way it's going to go and it's away from all of the other labs, which
Interesting.
make those labs dark and creepy. And like you can be in them 24 hours and have no notion of what time of day it is. And like that kind of
Wow.
eerie atmospheric. It had like a very like 1930s, 1940s feel to
Yeah.
it. And that was kind of the inspiration for like these creepy dark labs that no one can get into and nobody knows what's going on in there. And
Yeah.
I was like, there's a story there. There's
Yeah.
definitely a story there.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie The Cube?
Yes, I have.
That's what I'm thinking.
I mean, like there are vibes. There are definitely vibes. Like you could go certain places within the laboratories and like just like feel like how am I in a building
Hmm.
full of people and I feel so isolated and so alone and like I'm 1,000 feet underground. If
Yeah.
I scream, no one could hear me.
I mean, those are the vibes. Those are definitely the vibes. I literally just got goosebumps thinking. I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, don't know if I need that vibe right this moment, but I do appreciate the vibe.
Alone in a house. Can anyone hear you scream?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm also thinking like Resident Evil right now, like all those
Mm.
underground labs.
Yeah, I think that that's the other connection point is like a lot of people don't personally know scientists, like scientists that are actually working in the industry.
Mm,
It's something that is a little bit esoteric. And so the people that knew me, like their connection point to what I was doing when I'd say I'm working in drug development, and they'd be like, oh, so at the next zombie apocalypse, we'll be able to blame you. You did
yeah,
that. And
yeah.
like that was the running joke for like 5 years anytime somebody found out I was a scientist. And I was like, well, I do work in a creepy laboratory where like, all those giant vats of like pharmaceuticals getting ready to get shipped out to people, and
Huh.
it gives the vibes. And so
Yeah,
like
yeah.
creepy laboratory, zombie virus, there you go.
It's a match made in heaven for sure.
Absolutely.
So, what visions shaped this writing journey? What was that North Star guiding you forward along the way?
I would say for me, it's probably this idea of I carry these huge themes of the resiliency of the human spirit and like hope in community, that like so much of when you get into like science fiction genre and dystopian genre, you get
Mm,
like very grim, dark type of stories. And then there's like the whole, like the larger part of like horror thriller where you have like a no hope, this is where mankind is bound type of vibe. And
mm,
I'm the opposite. I like the idea of resiliency and that there is life after hard things, and
mm,
that wherever you are or however bad things get, there is a path forward. Like we are humans and we evolved to have community, and we're meant to come together and solve problems and be together despite what keeps us apart. And
mm,
so being somebody that has experienced profound trauma and had to start things over again, and figure out how to keep moving when things get hard, it's really kind of become a huge piece of like what I write when I write. Even if I'm not writing, there's still hope after this. It's like the themes that permeate everything that I write is like how to get back up and how to figure out how to keep going. And so, like, if you're picking up a book by me, you've got these themes of hope and community, and you've got a heck of a lot of science, and you've got a lot of nature, because that's my other grounding point is like
mm,
spending time outside and these like immersive, visceral experiences. And I
mm,
kind of like bring all of those important pieces of myself. And they're just things that I feel like I want to share and I want to express. Like,
mm.
I have felt so profoundly alone at times in my life. And I know that it doesn't have to be that way. And so it's kind of like a battle cry or an outreach of like people can find these connections and find these communities and believe that there's other people out there that like want to move forward and be a community no matter what things look like.
I love that because you kind of need that hope element, that next stage element when you are writing a lot of trauma influenced works. Because I
Yeah,
find that a lot of people use writing as a way to process trauma, right? Which is totally valid. But I find a lot of newer authors get stuck in the trauma because they haven't yet healed it for themselves.
right.
And so, like, the characters themselves can't get to that next stage either because the writers haven't gotten to that next stage yet.
I think that there's a lot of truth in that. Like you can kind of see when like writing is an excellent therapy tool, and like
Absolutely.
sometimes we write things and like I know I have written things that I didn't see a path forward with or didn't know what to do with this thing I created, and I had to put it away and kind of come back to it at another point in my own personal journey and go, "Oh, I know what I'm trying to say here. I know what I'm trying to do here." And I want to bring these characters through and give them stories that mean something. Like I want to write really cool, engaging, immersive stories, but I don't want those stories to just be a cool book that you read. I want I want readers to like feel hope through an adventure. And I think that that's a really interesting thing about Due North, which is the first book that I published, and it's book one in the Kara Mason series, is that it ends on a really tense, kind of hard moment.
Mm,
And I was always a little worried that that might leave readers feeling a little empty.
mm,
And one of the biggest pieces of feedback that I get from it is how much hope they feel at the end of the story, even with all of that tension.
mm,
And like it's really satisfying to hear because that's what I wanted. And
mm.
it's nice to hear when your message is coming through.
Yeah, yeah. Like you don't want to be gut punched by a book and then like left on the floor afterwards.
Exactly. Like you're like, you want to like take the punch and feel like everybody's getting back up together.
Yeah, yeah. Where you come up and you're like, I can't move on with my day right now because I'm still in this emotional place. Like you have to have some sort of either a bridge to the next step or closure, like whether it's a series or a one-off, there needs to be some type of continuation of it or closure of it in order to be like, okay, I can close the book and be okay with closing the book and moving on with my life in this moment.
Yeah. No, it's true because a lot of readers these days will say, like, I don't want to read in a series because I don't want to get left on a cliffhanger. Like, that is
Mm,
one of the big things that we hear when we get, like general audience feedback from readers. And like, I get that feeling. And I've had that feeling finishing a book. But
yeah,
I've also had books that end on massive cliffhangers that I have peace with because like they were well set up, so like I had closure on like the bigger message of the story, and
yeah,
like that like closure, that feeling of like being taken care of as a reader allows me to feel like I can wait and I am excited about the next thing.
yeah.
I'm not mad at that cliffhanger. And like it's an important distinction to recognize in yourself as a reader what you need to
Mm,
be comfortable with where a book with a sequel is going to leave you, because there are a lot of sequels out there, and a lot of those sequels have to end with some unanswered question,
yeah,
because otherwise why are we writing a sequel?
yeah.
But at the same time, like, you've got to have the care to take care of your readers for that one book, that first book. And it's a balance, and you've got to know as a reader how much of a cliffhanger, how much of an unanswered question are you comfortable with being left with, and for
Yeah.
how long.
Yeah, for how long is the big answer too, because if you're also a trad pub author, like it can take years between books for you to get any sort of continuation of the story.
Absolutely. And like I'm an indie author, but I am also the primary caregiver to two kids with special needs. So like I am not publishing that much faster than traditional authors out there because my time is very split
Mm.
and I have to accept my own limitations if I'm going to do this.
Yeah, yeah. There's a few trad pub authors that I'm kind of mad at right now because they're also in the middle of three different series at the moment. And I'm like, but I need closure for the first series first. Like, give me closure because like it's been years at this point.
Well, it's like the way that Stephen King put out The Dark Tower, and
Mm,
there were people who were like literally on their deathbeds wondering whether or not they were going to get resolution for this massive 7-book saga that was written during so many other books being produced.
yeah,
And like that must have been hard. Like I'm one of the lucky ones that discovered it when everything was written.
yeah, yeah.
And like I feel torn because I kind of love going on the emotional roller coaster with the authors as they're putting their books out.
Mm.
And I'm old school. I'm a geriatric millennial. So like, I'm from the heyday of when books were released. I was going to wait a minimum of 1 year for the next book, a lot of the times 2 or 3 years. And so like I have a patience built inside of me for more series. However, I know that the generation below us that's used to traditional publishing, hi you, let's go back outside. I know that's a thing now, like having a traditional published book or having an indie book, like you've got to show up for your audience. Give me
Yeah.
1 second.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, come on. Let's go back to the yeah. No, thank you. Oh, you want unicorn goggles? I can get you
The
those.
joys of
Hey,
parenthood,
why
right?
don't you go show? Why don't you go show Nick? Okay, they'll fix them for you. Okay. It's probably the hardest thing about middle of the day.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. I mean, we've
Like
kind
I
of talked
don't.
about lessons. Are there any lessons that you want to add to this discussion that we're having?
Oh, I mean, I would say just from an author standpoint, one of the lessons is be okay with going on your own journey. I think so
Mm,
much of the messaging that we get as authors is learn from other people, don't make the mistakes that they make, see how another person did it and imitate it or emulate it. And while I think that there's truth, like we absolutely should be learning from one another, I also think that there has become a fear within the industry of showing up imperfectly and making your own mistakes and
yeah,
going on your own growth. And
yeah.
like I see that a lot with authors that don't know how to show up like where they are and are worried about like looking like they've got it all figured out or looking like they're further along in their journey than they actually are. And that's a hard thing to see because I think we all have our own insecurities. Like,
Absolutely.
we're working in the arts. This is a creative industry, and that is where imposter syndrome thrives. And
Yeah.
I know I suffer from it, more often than not. But I also know that, like, if I'm not showing up authentically, saying, this is where I'm at, it's, maybe not as far along the journey as I'd like it to be, or, you know, seeing somebody else like show up in a storm and like take everything over and know that that's not my journey, or that publishing a genre blending book or publishing a genre blending series is like not the easiest thing to market. Like, it's hard to see those things as mistakes, and I think that marketing to authors would have us believe that those are mistakes that we are
Mhm.
meant to avoid. But I always like to think like failure is the most important step on the way to success, because
Mhm.
you cannot make it to success without failure. And if you see somebody who seems like they are making it to success without failure, then you're not seeing the whole picture, because everybody's journey is riddled with missteps and things that
Mhm.
didn't work and imperfections, and that is life. That is the journey.
Yeah.
And we have in this like social media marketing era of publishing come to expect the perfect aesthetic and the perfect journey and the polished presentation. And it's not something that it's not a standard that anyone can live up to. And the people who are living up to that standard by appearances absolutely aren't, because it's an image and it's false. And
Mhm.
the more we as authors fall into that image of what it's supposed to look like, or how you're supposed to present yourself, or how successful you are on and your value based on that, like if you fall into that trap, then you're never getting out. Like, you've gotta be willing to go on the imperfect journey. You gotta be able to carry your 3-year-old out of a live interview.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Well, I think it's because of all the technological advances that we've had in the last however many decades, like the creative production process has reached light speed with how fast people can produce and publish creative works, right? Like social media has definitely accelerated that, but even the self-publishing process in general and all of the tools that we have at our disposal to take it from finished product to out in the public eye. And I think a lot of people believe that they need to have that be a speed up of the perfecting process as well. And that doesn't necessarily correlate with the creative process, because you have to experiment. You have to have your sketchbooks before you get to your canvas, right? And a lot of people think that their sketchbooks have to be as perfect as their canvases are.
Absolutely. Like you see that with, um, like you said, like now that everybody is like putting their journeys out there on social media, you see a lot of debut authors that have a hit debut that takes off, and then they're staring down the barrel of their second book and they can't get it written. And they can't get it written because in their head, this second book has to be this finished product. Like, it has to look like this book that you already finished. And it's like, if that's your standard for your first draft, then you're in a lot of trouble, because I there are authors who write very clean first drafts, but there is no such thing as a first draft that looks like your finished product that you went through
Absolutely.
all of this work and went on a journey with.
Yeah.
And it's the same. Like my first book was published in May of 2020, heart of the pandemic, right? I was putting things together for, like, I was loading all of my stuff onto my new phone, and
Mhm.
I saw that I made my author Instagram account on June 26th of 2020, which means
Mhm.
that I did not have author social media until after I published my first book.
Mhm.
And like, if you think about it in terms of what we know about marketing, that's like the
Yeah.
hugest no-no. Like,
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
wonder nobody knew you published a book. And
Yeah.
like, I kind of look at it like, so that's what I did. I have one now. So I didn't know how to market my book when I published it. I'm here now. Like, I have read so many books published 10, 20, 50, 100 years ago that speak to me, and that I'm drawn to the same amount as a book that's coming out today. And it's so easy for us to think that there's an expiration date on our marketing,
Mhm.
but there is not. Like, these aren't cars we're driving off of the lot. These books have infinite perpetual value. Like, they're the worth the same the day you publish them as they are 5 years down the road. So you don't have to be scared that you don't know what you're doing now. You can keep working on it and keep figuring out who the audience is or where to reach your audience. And it doesn't matter that you didn't do it yesterday. And as long as you're not getting stuck only doing that, and you're also still moving forward in your career, writing in the next book, you know, figuring out your next creative endeavor, like, all of that is there. It's all value, it's equity in your life and your creative process.
Absolutely. My whole approach to marketing changed when I started thinking of myself as a mad scientist.
I
Like,
like
I
that.
was thinking about that when you were talking about the science stuff earlier, is like sometimes I blow up my laboratory.
I think, like I said, it's part of the journey, right? If you're not willing to, like, aim big and give it a shot and
Yeah.
completely fail, and then do an after action report of, like, was there anything good in there? Or do you
Yeah.
scratch the whole idea and start
Yeah.
over again?
Yeah. Walking out of the laboratory with like singed hair, being like, all right, lesson learned.
What did we learn here? Did we
Yes.
survive? Can
Yeah.
we get back up? And the answer, like, when we're talking about creative things and when we're talking about these careers, these creative careers, the answer is always yes. There's not really anything that you can't come back from. I embarrass myself on video every single day because I have not figured out how to show up on screen without, like, my own self-consciousness. And
Mhm.
that inevitably means that I'm going to show up and embarrass myself or be awkward or not get my words out right. And while I might not be okay with, like, my awkwardness or my self-consciousness, I'm okay with knowing that that's where I am in the process. And so,
Mhm.
get on there, embarrass myself every day, and eventually I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah. 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 Well, I know we're coming up on time here. Is there any like practical tips, tools you want to leave the audience with as we think about how to keep ourselves sane throughout this process?
I think the thing that's helped me the most is remembering that I am on my own journey,
Mm,
and my own journey looks very different from everyone else's
mm,
and very similar to other people's, whether or not that's what they're purporting it to look like. And so I follow my own journey, which means that I draft like a mad woman trying not to drown and then step back from a completed work and turn it into something workable.
mm.
I'm not a clean drafter. I'm very messy and I'm very okay with writing the whole story all over again. And there are so many people that have well structured plotting procedures. And it's like I do
Mhm.
that after I write a first draft. I write a chaos draft and then I plot it and rewrite it again. And like that sounds like a lot of work and it sounds like nonsense, but that's my journey. That's how I get words on pages that turn into manuscripts.
Mhm.
And if I were worried about whether or not that was the best way to do it, I would probably not write. And so the
Yeah.
answer is I've got to do it my way. I've got to follow my journey so that I'm creating work that I can create, because that's a lot more worth it than not actually ever getting anything down on paper.
Yeah, yeah. That's one of the tips of advice that I give people is like, if you need to sing it out, if you need to dance it out, if you need to like throw words on paper willy-nilly, like just do it how you need to get those words out because they don't need to be perfect the first time around.
Yeah. I'm big in the let yourself info dump. You can fix it later.
Yeah, 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 yeah. All right. Well,
Yeah.
anything you want to add before you start wrapping up?
Um, Not that I can think of. Like, this has been great. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad that we were able to finally connect.
Yeah, yeah. It's, schedules, it's my schedule has just been mercurial lately. And I'm like, all right, you do you, boo. I'll just show up and respond to whatever my calendar says that day.
Yeah. Sometimes getting through life is just taking the next step over and over again.
Yeah, yeah. I'm like, all right, what am I doing now? All right, cool. I'll go do that. All right, this is powerful stuff that we're talking about. In audience, we definitely encourage you to share your own thoughts and feelings and insights and stories with us as well. We'd love to know how visions like these have impacted you in your own lives. Special thanks to Jill for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
All right. It was really great.
Yeah, so please comment, like, subscribe below. Check out Linktree/Claire Joyance for all of my links. And then where can folks find out more about you?
You can find me on Instagram and TikTok. It's same for both, JillenDavies_books. And I also have a website, which is jillendavies.com.
Awesome. And I'll make sure the links are available in the show notes and descriptions for easy access. Until next time, please remember that you all have extraordinary stories to share, and we're rooting for you as you use them to change the world for the better. Take care, guys.
All right. Bye.